Hello and welcome back to the ShameOver Podcast. I am here today with Hope Flansburg and I am so excited. Hope is one of my favorite people in the planet and I can't wait for you guys to get to know her. So Hope, welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, thanks, Erica. I'm thrilled to be here. One, because I miss catching up with you, but
No.
two, yeah, just to talk. You and I have so much in common. So when we do catch up, we have a lot to share. So I'm thrilled to be here and share it with you, your audience. I'm Hope Flansburg. I am an author and I am a trauma-informed wellness educator. So, gosh, it's been a while since I've done this. So I have a history, which I'm sure Erica and I will be talking about. But basically, after years of experience and work experience and life experience and health experience, my passion is to teach people how our bodies are designed to work, but what gets in the way and interrupts that design, whether it's stress, whether it's stress causing health issues, whether it's lifestyle, whether it's foods we eat, all of this stuff can interrupt our design of how our body's supposed to function and cause unwanted symptoms and disease. So that's what I do. And I do it in a variety of ways. I have workshops, I have webinars. I love to hold women's events, but I also write books because I write women's fictional books because in the books I share the stories of kind of our journeys and what we go through in life and how that impacts how we show up for others in our world, emotionally, physically, and spiritually.
Yes. And I do have to say, and I'm not getting paid to say this at all, but I have read Hope's book and is it piece by piece, pieces by
Yeah.
piece, piece by piece. It was so therapeutic for me. It was so good. I mean, this was years ago. This was, I think, pre-kids. Oh, yeah, yeah, it would have been pre-kids.
Yeah.
But it was so good. And I remember it just being like actual therapy for me. So highly recommend. I know you can still get everything on Amazon, right?
Yeah, you can definitely get it on Amazon. I prefer people if they want to order it through my website because I can personalize them. But
Oh,
yes, there you can get them on Amazon. You can go to any bookstore and order them. They're available globally.
yes. And what's the other
So,
one called?
Angel Kisses.
Angel Kisses, that's right. And are you working on another? I
I
thought so.
am. Yes. I started, so I've written 7 books. I've published 2. I am working on one I started about 2 years ago. It was July 2 years ago. I was back in Nebraska. My dad was having health issues at the time, so I was home helping my parents. And I ran into some high school friends and I went home that night and it was just like, boom, I had this story kind of evolve um, from having conversations with some of my high school friends. And so I started it then, but as I was telling Erica, we've been going through a huge life transition the last year and a half. So I put it away, but I pulled it out again a few months ago, and I've been diligently working on it a little bit every day. And I am so excited. 2 reasons. My writing skills have improved from the last time I published a book. I've been just really honing in on my writing skills and getting a lot of support and help around that. And so my writing skills have improved. And this storyline it's a fascinating storyline. It's
Oh, I
fascinating.
can't wait.
So, yeah. I tell people I may not be the best writer in the world, but I can spin a good story.
Oh,
So,
yeah. Well, I would disagree. I love what I've
oh,
read from yours so far. So I think you're
thank
a
you.
phenomenal writer. But
Thank you.
well, keep me posted on that. That's so
Yeah,
exciting. Yes.
I'm excited about this one.
Yeah. So Hope and I know each other. Our husbands used to work together. They were on a rotational schedule that had them not with us, basically half of the time. And they were international. So Hope and I were able to get together and really feel how hard that can be. It's So not the same as military wives or spouses, I should say.
Right.
Not only just based on what our husbands were doing, and we had access to them and everything, but we kind of got an insight to that life, like saying goodbye for a period of time, and just like having to you have your life with them and then your life without them, and just how much it rocks your world in a sense. I know that Hope, that's how you and I were really able to not only come together and meet each other, but it was definitely one of my biggest growth periods in all of my life, which is crazy to say since we do so much growing through our adolescence, into our
Right.
20s. But what are what are some of the big things that kind of have come out of that for you? Both of us now have our husbands at home, which is great. So we're in different stages of our lives again. But is there anything that has really come out of that for you personally, as you're on this journey?
Oh gosh. It was. So my husband did rotational work for 8 years. He just finished this summer and is now permanently home. And we are permanently together for the first time in 8 years. So we're still kind of in the getting
Getting
used
to
to
know
that
each
new
other again.
lifestyle. But looking over the last 8 years, there was a lot of growth. We're in our 50s, and Erica, like you said, we always continue to grow and change and evolve on the journey, no matter what season we're in. But that one was a really interesting and unexpected one. I think mostly for our relationship, but for
Mhm.
our relationship to thrive, we had to figure out individual stuff because we weren't together. And so going, and then we became empty nesters at the same time. So going from all of that kind of normal, I guess you could say, lifestyle into something that was very foreign to all of us, and being a wife and still, you know, being so family oriented, but also having so much individuality for the first time in 20 years for me.
Yeah.
Um, so for me, it was learning to rediscover who I was.
Yes.
Um, Especially when we sold our house and moved to the remote areas of Wyoming. And I think I may have shared this with you one time when we were talking when we were in Wyoming. It almost came to a point where I had all of these roles. I was a mother, I was a wife, I was a yoga instructor, I was a fitness instructor at one point in time. I had my career. I had all of these things that kind of made me who I was.
Mhm.
And with Sky's job in Africa and then our move to a remote location, I didn't have my friends, I didn't have my community, I didn't have my job, I didn't have my kids, I didn't have my husband, I didn't even have my house. And I
Mm.
remember sitting down and look and one day and just kind of being like, I feel like the universe is forcing me to figure out who I am without all of these roles that defined me in the past. It wasn't easy. It wasn't comfortable. It was horribly uncomfortable.
I wish you could see these chills right now. Like, yes.
It was terribly uncomfortable. But I also had I've been through enough transitions in my life to know that when they come, there's a reason. And when you get to the other side, you'll be able to look back and be like, there was a reason for this. And so I knew there was a reason. So I kind of had to embrace it. I chose to embrace it and I chose to move through it. And on the other side of it, there was just so much personal growth and value. I had to learn my value and my
Mhm.
self-worth in a whole different way.
That is
So
powerful. Well,
I,
and I'm so glad that you brought that up because I mean, I feel like all of life is about us evolving and getting to know ourselves differently, and having that acceptance that who we were last year and who we are now isn't the same person. And that's a good thing. That doesn't need to be a bad thing, because it happens so slowly or quietly that we don't necessarily see that. But I work with a lot of women who are nearing retirement or freshly retired. And it's such a different life because they're, like you went
yeah,
through all these different stages, even
yeah,
being an empty nester and doing that kind of on your own. while also part-time doing it, with your husband as well. But just getting to know ourselves on that different, deeper level. And that can be so hard, especially, like as we get older, it's like, well, I know myself. Like, I don't need to do this. And then we wake up and realize, like, do I actually know myself? Like, it's so easy to just go through the motions. And especially with the pace of life nowadays, I mean, if we can't, my husband and I can't figure something out, it's like, what do? We ask Google, like we don't have to wait for anything. So a lot of times we think we know ourselves, but are we really just going so fast, like trying to keep up with everything that we lose sight of kind of who we are in the process as well? And, like having that realization, I think for myself, even more recently, because, after two young kids, like you do lose that no matter how, even if you do this as a living, you're trying to, help people make themselves a priority, you can still let yourself fall to the wayside, so it's like just having that understanding that we are growing and changing and that it's okay to be able to be like, oh, let's take a step back, like I'm not who I thought I was, or things have changed, and like having that grace and acceptance with it as well.
Well, I think in what you said is knowing ourselves. And I think like I was just telling you before we started this recording that the last year and a half has been really hard. We went through another transition. And what that has taught me is that even when we grow and we learn who we are, things can happen in life and we can lose it.
Mm.
And in the last year and a half, we went through several different changes, job changes, home changes, financial changes, lot, all of these things. And there came a point when it's like, I'm grounded enough that I'm like at the core, I knew who I am, but I stopped doing all of the really good things to take care of myself because I was so inundated with the chaos that life was throwing our way on a weekly, daily basis.
Mhm.
And so it is so easy to get off track. And in the process of getting off track, it's easy to just kind of get lost in it. And then get to a point where I have to regroup. I mean, I had to regroup a lot the last year and a half. I had to regroup a lot and be like, okay, um, who am I again? And
Yeah.
who do I know that I am? But I think if I wouldn't have had that experience in the last 8 years to teach me who I was without all the things and all the labels, it would have been really hard to do. So that's, even though the moments were hard and the transitions were hard, I'm very grateful for them
Oh yeah.
because I think it took me a long time, a really long time. And I feel like I kept getting kicked in the head with the same lesson over and over and over. But I finally sunk in
Hmm.
that when the hard things come, because they're going to come, there's nothing we can do about it. The hard things are going to come. The different transitions of life are going to come. The difficulties, the stress, all of that. But it now I come to it from a place where I'm like, this is just going to help me grow. This is just going to help get me more stronger, more self-sufficient, more wise, more this, more that. So when they come, they don't feel so heavy. They don't freak me out as much as they used to because I know that there's so much growth in the period of it that's helping transform me into the person that I'm meant to be.
Yes. Well, and
So,
a lot of people listening to this, they're a lot of that transition or those, everything that you described, like we, alcohol can be such a big part of that. And when we're numbing with alcohol or using alcohol, for prolonging the good feelings or not facing the bad feelings or any of that, like it can really take a toll, and it can help us from like getting to know ourselves and really understand, like when we're buffering things with alcohol, we can't feel everything that we need to feel. And we can't get all the lessons that necessarily need to come out of it. So that I think is one thing that I've realized. And I know you and I agree with you for myself as well that like I would not trade anything for the time period that we had because even though when Josh was traveling, it was the hardest time of my life. I became the person who I wanted to be and who I always knew was inside of me. And I don't think I would have ever got to be that person if it wasn't kind of forced in a sense.
Right.
But like he was gone and it was, I, I had to find who I was without him.
Yeah.
And like he's my best friend. Like I'm so lucky we have a great marriage, we have a great relationship. But it would have been very easy to have that become who I was. Like now I'm a wife. I'm like, and not in a bad way, but just like lose kind of sight of who I was as an individual. And I am so much stronger and more aware of who I am because of that experience, which I know everyone doesn't have the privilege or however you want to see it, having to deal with what we did. Um, but bringing up like the self-care that you were talking about, what are some things that you would recommend? Because again, I know I've struggled with this myself,
Yeah.
but without using alcohol as a way to make ourselves feel better or anything along those lines, what are things that you recommend that you personally do yourself or that you recommend for your clients when it comes to like self-care?
So it's funny. I'm going to tell you a story that anybody who's known me the last 20 years sometimes finds it a little shocking. But anybody who knew me 30 and younger is like, oh, yeah. They're like, oh, yeah. Um, my coping mechanisms in my 20s were smoking and drinking. I was a cigarette smoker. My dad was a smoker when I was growing up. And, I was a kid that was like, oh, that's disgusting. I'm never going to smoke. But then when I hit college and I started having depression and anxiety and things that I'd never experienced before, smoking really worked. Smoking
Mm,
and drinking worked for me. Um, so those were my two go-to things. Well, after I got divorced when I got divorced from my daughter's father when I was 26. I was married early, had kids young, and then I was divorced by the time I was 26. And then, of course, anxiety
mm,
exacerbates, during a divorce, and you start dealing with a lot of emotional things that I had never experienced before. And so I was smoking more, I was drinking more. Um, I that is right around that time period is also when I really started getting introduced to a holistic lifestyle. I didn't know at the time that's what it was.
sure.
These things were kind of crossing my path. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. I was a fitness instructor at the time, but I was the fitness instructor that would teach a class. Then I would go smoke like 3 or 4 cigarettes. And then I would go for a jog. And then I would go to Taco John's and get my meal. And then I would go when my kids were with their dad, because we had um, standardized visitation. They would go with their dad, and I would go out with my friends and I would drink
Mhm.
because that was easier than coping with the loneliness of not having my kids around. That was really tough on me, but I didn't want to deal with it. So
Yeah.
that was kind of my vicious cycle that I was caught up in. But ironically, at the same time, I was being introduced to energy work through Reiki and meditation and yoga.
Okay.
And it was one of those circumstances where I went to a yoga class and the instructor got me so deep into relaxation that I came out of relaxation. I was like, oh my God, that feels better than anything else that I'm doing over here to cope. And that was a big pivotal moment for me. I was like, that felt like all over. I mean, it just all over felt, I can't even describe it. It felt so good. My nervous system felt great. My mind was clear. I felt like I could even see better.
Mm,
Um, so so that's really when yoga and meditation started to become more of a tool for me. And the more I used it, the less I was smoking and the less I was drinking. I found out that that was curbing my anxiety. more than the other two. The other two were actually increasing. So I didn't realize it,
It
but the other two
suppresses
were
it, but
actually,
then, yeah.
I thought they were helping, but temporarily. And
Mhm.
then my anxiety during the next day or, the rest of the week was actually worse.
Mhm.
Where when I started doing more yoga and meditation and energy work, um, I was having the long-term benefits. And so for me, it just kind of became, it just, I started doing this. It just was more of this and less of this. And then that just evolved over time into more self-care practices being introduced to me. And there were some that came along that I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I would try it. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's not for me. And then other ones that I'm like, okay, I can really stick with this. And so for me, it is yoga, it is meditation, it is energy work. Acupuncture has been a new one. I added
Mm,
it into
I
my
love it.
life about 6 years ago. And now speaking of insurance, like we were a little bit ago, there are a lot of insurances out there that are covering acupuncture treatments.
Yeah,
So if you have one of those benefits, I would say take advantage of it.
huge
But
fan of
acupuncture
acupuncture.
is getting more. So about 6, 7 years ago, acupuncture became big for me. And during the 4 years I was in transition of living in small remote areas, I didn't have access to it. And so I'm now adding that back into my toolbox and I
Yeah.
love it. Absolutely, absolutely love it. And walking in nature for me is a big thing. So
Yes. So when you started noticing like your anxiety getting better, you were just feeling better, you were the clarity, all of that, was it like when you kind of started making this switch to focusing more on yoga and meditation and drinking and smoking was becoming less and less, was it subconscious? Was it like, did you have the awareness or, because I know we're all
yeah,
on completely different levels when it comes to kind of the self-awareness or what's working, what's not. And I guess if you even remember it, I know it wasn't
yeah,
yesterday, but how much time did it kind of take for you to start doing that, or what did your
yeah,
commitment to yoga and meditation look like? Because I know a lot of times people are like, well, I've been doing yoga, I'm starting meditation, it's not, really making a difference. And it's very easy to forget that we've been drinking for years and years and years, and we've been practicing. Like, I joke, but it's like whatever you practice, you get good at. You've been practicing at drinking for years. You were
oh yeah,
practicing smoking for years. So it's not going to, 1 week or 1 month of meditating and doing yoga isn't going
yeah,
to like flip the switch. But,
yeah,
how consistently were you doing this, or when did you start like at least feeling differently that you're just like, I'm actually not feeling as good from that, and this is making me feel
yeah.
better?
Um, it's funny. I was a really good drinker. I really was.
I mean,
I was really good at it. Um,
mhm.
and this was, I mean, this for me, I mean, I'm 51 now, so this was 25 years ago. That it was subconscious. It was very subconscious at first.
Okay. Yeah,
Nobody around me was doing anything like this. I grew up in the 80s with the no pain, no gain mentality of not even health, but of fitness. It was a fitness mindset. It wasn't a
yeah,
health or wellness mindset.
totally.
And so I carried that on into, um, when I was teaching into my 20s, late 20s. And so it was very subconscious. And, yoga wasn't at the time, and meditation, it wasn't a daily practice for me. It was a few times a week. Um, and then what happened, I got certified. They needed another yoga instructor at the gym, and I was already there teaching. I was already going to class. So I got certified. I wasn't a good yoga instructor. I love yoga. I was not a good instructor. But I taught the classes. So then it became a little bit more consistent in my world. but it did take time, and it's been a journey. It's a relationship. And so a relationship with your body, just like any relationship, when you get in with another spouse, you have to learn who they are, learn what they're about, learn what their needs are, learn what their likes and dislikes are. And we do that with our kids, we do that with our spouse, we do that with our parents, we do that with our friends. But for some reason, we don't necessarily do it with our own bodies. And our relationship with our body is honestly one of the top
The
most
most
important
important, yeah.
relationships we're going to have, because it's
Well,
with us
and it
until the day we
changes
die.
over time. And I think that we forget that. Like it changes over time. Our bodies, how they were in our 20s are different than the 30s and 40s and 50s. And it's constantly changing. And again, we have that awareness and acceptance sometimes with other people, but with ourselves, like not at all.
I mean, I think about this. How often do we go to our spouse and be like, okay, what worked in the past isn't working now, so what do we need to do different? I mean,
Exactly.
for a healthy marriage, we have to address that every now and then.
Yeah,
So we
totally.
get to know with our bodies too. Um, and so it is. And I don't think I really realized, when it all started for me in my late 20s, that I was reevaluating the relationship with my body. I don't think it really hit me probably till I was 35, that this is something, I mean, I was doing the stuff and it felt good and I liked it, but I don't think I really realized till I was about 35 that I really wanted this to be even more of a priority for
Mm.
me, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Was there like a shift or something that kind of like had the alarm notice to you on that or?
Yeah, I got diagnosed with fibromyalgia in
Mm.
2006. My health just tanked. I mean, even though I was doing some of the good stuff, I mean, I wasn't smoking anymore. I had quit smoking when I was 30, but I was still, I was still drinking. And I was never, after I had my kids, I would drink, but I wasn't as heavy of a drinker as I was in my early 20s before I had kids. I was a responsible drinker, but I still drank.
Yeah.
And when my kids were with their dad, I would still go out with my friends. Sky and I would socialize. Um, but I was also going through an extremely chronic, an extreme period of chronic stress. Between 26 and about 35, it was chronic stress. I was single parenting, financial problems. Sky and I were blending a family. And so my health just tanked.
Mm.
And doctor after doctor after doctor, I knew something wasn't right. Could never get answers. Everybody telling me it was in my head. And I'm like, no, this really isn't in my head.
Mhm.
My head's really motivated. I want to be able to do all these things, but my body's not allowing me.
Yeah.
So finally, I got diagnosed with fibromyalgia in 2006. And they wanted to put me on, and I mean, this was 20 years ago. So they're like, your options are anti-inflammatories, pain meds, antidepressants, and anti-anxiety pills. And by the time you're 50, you'll be on disability. And for me and my personality, I just said, well, that's not an option.
Yeah.
I'm a very physically active person. I love to be physically active. Um, it wasn't an option. And so at the time, I didn't know what I wanted, I didn't know what to do, but I
Yeah.
knew I didn't want to do that. So that then is when I'm like, okay, I want to take this more seriously. I want to make this a priority. I have this body for hopefully however, 70, 80 more years. I want it to last with me the entire time. So what do I need to do
Mm.
to make this work? And how do we need to work together to become partners in moving forward? So that was the pivotal moment.
Oh,
But
wow.
it was about when I was about 34, 35.
That is, I mean, that's a big thing to deal with. And just, I mean, not only advocating for yourself is number one there, but that whole mindset thing, I
Yeah.
think is huge because a lot of times it can be like, okay, those are my only options, because when we're talking to doctors, we assume like you're giving me my best options. And that's not, if you know it's not the best options for you, then keep going until you figure out what is. So obviously you're 50 or in your 50s, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you are not on disability. You are
Nope.
thriving. So what changes did you make for you to be able to be thriving and healthy and doing great now?
It was a process, and I
Mhm.
have made a lot of changes, but it was a process, and it didn't happen overnight. It took time, and I took it one step at a time. I didn't go in like full steam at, well, one, I didn't know what to do.
Yeah, exactly.
There
There
was
was not near
nobody
as
in my
much
world.
information out there 20
Yeah,
years ago.
there was nobody in my world saying, "Oh, well, try this or do this," or I didn't have anybody in my world um, saying this is what you need to do differently. So I just I prayed and just kind of was like, whatever path I'm supposed to go on, just present itself and hopefully the things will show up. Ironically, they did, but it was a little bit at a time. So I didn't go full steam ahead. I started out, I'm grateful for my yoga and meditation practice because I think that's what gave me the awareness to
And the
be like, I
openness
need to
to,
do something different.
hmm
I don't think I would have had that just because I was not an
totally.
aware person. I just
Yeah.
wasn't. Like, I remember when I met you, and I mean, your age, when I met you, I'm like, oh, you're so wise and you're so self-aware. I was not that at that age. I wasn't.
Well, we all have our different times.
So, anyways, um, yeah. So at first, I cut out. I knew sugar was a big inflammatory, and
Mhm.
I knew part of my problem was inflammation. So I did. I just started cutting out. I cut out caffeine. I started cutting out sugars. Um, not all of them, but slowly, little by little. So I started with sugar,
Mhm.
and that helped. I did also realize the impact that my emotional health and stress was how that was contributing to the inflammation in my body and the chronic pain. So I did immediately seek mental health supports to work through some trauma and some anger. Was a big one for me, and
Yeah.
some emotional. I always say, I tell my clients, we hold our issues in our tissues, and if you don't release them and you don't process them, they got to go somewhere. Where mine were just kind of stuck everywhere.
I am
So
taking that. That is so profound. We hold our issues in our tissues. Oh my God, yes.
yeah, so I had to get my issues out of my tissues.
Yeah.
So, because they just wanted to manifest there, and the hurt, the pain, the trauma, the anger, it was just stuck in my body. So, getting some mental health support and working around that. So honestly, that is also when you talk about self-care, that's a big one for me, is
Absolutely.
over the years, because things happen.
Mhm.
So over the years, I have my little pocket of people that help my mental health, and I tap into them when I need and when it's necessary.
Is,
So
is there anything that stands out for you that has worked with anger? Because I can definitely say just as women,
yeah,
and this has become very apparent to me now having young children, but I can label anger. I
yeah,
can't feel anger. Like we weren't allowed to. Not only,
yeah,
a lot of children are not, you're not supposed to be angry, but like we aren't taught how to express it so that we get it out so that it doesn't stay in our tissues.
yeah. That was a big one for me too. My anger scared me. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it
For me,
terrified me
postpartum
because
issues, which I had with my second, I've never had rage in my life. And all of a sudden, like out of body experiences where I'm like, I need to walk away because this is why bad things happen, you know.
Mhm.
Luckily, I had the self-awareness to know when I needed to remove myself and take a break. But it was like out of body. I could feel the rage coming on, and I was just like, I don't know what to do with this.
And that's, I grew up in a family, and you and I have talked about our families before. I grew up in a family where, I mean, it was happy, it was fun, it was positive, it was, happy, there were just good things. I didn't grow up seeing a lot of negative emotions,
Yeah.
um, which I'm so, so, so grateful for. So grateful for. But it's a blessing and a curse
No.
because I didn't see them and I didn't experience them. When I became an adult and I had them, I didn't know how to deal with them.
Yeah, and you're like, what's wrong with me? Because I didn't see this growing up, so I must be doing something wrong. Or yeah, totally.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a catch 22. So, yeah, one of my therapists really, and for me, it's interesting because I grew up, and you did too, with brothers.
Mhm.
So I was kind of a tomboy and I loved to roughhouse with my brothers, but it was never anything extreme. But what I learned from me and how my body works, and I preface this with everybody's body is different.
Yeah.
So you got to find out what works for your body. But for me, and maybe just how I grew up, my therapist finally told me, she said, "What if you had a punching bag?" And so my mother went out and bought me a punching bag and I hung it in the garage. And that's what I would go do because I just needed to beat the shit out of that punch. I hope I can say that. I
Yeah.
needed to beat the punching bag. And oh my God, what that did for my body, because I do have that tomboyish side of me that, you
Yeah.
know, kind of needed to release. The way that, you know, men do. I don't want to say that men do, but men need to be physical to kind of let go of their anger. And I found
Yeah.
out that I do as well.
Well, I feel like a lot of us do, but again, just as women, a lot of times we're not taught that that's an option. I actually just last week, I believe it was, met a therapist here locally, just at some networking event, who she actually does boxing therapy. So
Yes.
she's talking to you while you have like like she's wearing the hand gloves or whatever. I'm like, I am so curious. I
Yeah.
I know you and me are both pretty spiritual, but I've been thinking so much about doing like one of the rage rooms, and I keep seeing signs everywhere, like literal physical signs. Rage room 2 blocks away. I'm like, this is literally a sign that I needed to get in there and do that. But I think I'm just so afraid of like going in there and like it all comes out because I mean, just being an athlete, tomboy like you, hitting things does feel good, like going to the batting cages for me, like it felt
Yeah.
so good in that. Like I work out a ton, but pushing my body to the limits does some, but it's not the same as like actual physical hitting of something. So yeah, I think that I've actually been thinking about getting some sort of punching bag or something for the house. So I think I'm going to need to look into it more because I think that just getting that physical aggression out, like we
Mhm.
know energy, no energy is stagnant. It's going to sit with you and stay, moving on in your body until you get it out. So letting that stuff come out in a healthy way, I think is brilliant.
Yeah. And I feel blessed that I had a therapist kind of teach me because I was scared of it. And I
Mhm.
was kind of at the point where I was starting to see that I could either take this out on my family and those around me, or I can learn it needs to go somewhere. So
Yeah.
I needed to learn. And I had a wonderful therapist who really guided me with ways to do that, in safe ways. And I don't know if you ever, I had, when I was holding workshops up in Colorado, I had a 1 day workshop that was with this gal named Rin. And she took us out into the woods and taught us in a safe environment how to throw temper tantrums.
I was not there. I wish I had been.
Yeah. And it was great. And so that's something I've also used over the years. And I've been lucky also. I mean, I live in the woods and in remote areas where I can go and have my
Totally.
little temper tantrum,
Yeah.
and not people walking up on me going, "What are you doing?" But I've also found ways to do it, when you start feeling things build up. But I think having that good support system, of people around you that can teach you, how can I do this, but do it safe, whether it's with a pillow, with a mattress,
Totally.
you know, things like that, to honor what's around me, but to get
Mhm.
this rage that builds up. out in a
Yes.
safe way. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because I mean, there's just so many options out there parenting wise, but I've been learning a lot, parenting myself, having these two young kids because as I had mentioned, like we can express our emotions, but feeling them is completely different. And I believe this I heard from Dr. Becky. I don't know if you've heard of her, familiar with her, but our one rule at the house is as long as you don't hurt anyone or yourself, you can get it out. But in my mind, I'm like, okay, Carson, go yell in a pillow, go like punch the pillow, whatever. But I'm still like, in my mind, like this is like your quiet space, like go do it in your room, and that's not where it comes out. Like her screaming, her tantrums, her all of that can just happen in the middle of the kitchen. And even though she's not hurting herself or anyone else, like it is my urge to be like, stop, like go to your room, go do this somewhere else, like just not around me. And why I bring up Dr. Becky is she made it very obvious that like I'm not uncomfortable with what you're doing is not wrong. I'm uncomfortable with how it's making me feel. And I
Mhm.
think that is like kind of the hardest thing as we're going through this. And again, like before, I would use alcohol. So like I didn't necessarily feel these things. If I had a bad day, if I was stressed, if I was now my number one rule is if it's negative emotions, I don't drink. Like it's taken off the table. And so I'm having to figure out how to feel things and how to sit in the discomfort. And that, like you had mentioned earlier, like it is hard, it is uncomfortable. But I think one of the biggest things is like starting to explore different things that do let you get this out in a safe and healthy way that yeah it might make other people uncomfortable for a second, but that's okay. It's like how can you do this, like you said, respecting everyone and everything around you, but still letting yourself get this stuff out. And a lot of that, especially the older we are, the more uncomfortable it feels because we've spent so many years not doing it, but allowing ourselves that freedom to try different things and see what actually can help get some of that energy out or make you feel a little bit better.
There is a type of yoga that I love to do. It's not, I can't say it's not popular. It is popular. You just don't hear about it very often, but it's called
Okay.
Kundalini yoga.
Oh,
And it's one of my favorites because it has one of my support people in my world had guided me to it many years ago because they do have different ways to work through some of the anger in a more aggressive type way. But one of the instructors, one of her phrases was through Kundalini yoga, part of the goal is to get comfortable being uncomfortable. So when you're talking about
yeah.
just the being uncomfortable, and so when I would take her class, it would always remind me, okay, this is part of the goal is and just her reminding me that when I would be uncomfortable, just hearing her say that would be like, oh, okay,
Yes.
oh yeah, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be getting comfortable with this uncomfortableness. And so I
Yes.
hear that in the back of my head all the time now. But I love if Kundalini yoga is a little bit different. It's not your typical vinyasa flow yoga class. But if anybody is interested into trying new things, there are different classes where you are moving your body in different ways to get some of that more intense emotion out. And sometimes you're pounding on the floor, pounding on your yoga mat, you're stomping your feet, just different types. So anyways, just a little plug for Kundalini yoga because it's kind of my
I'm
favorite.
gonna have to look into that because yeah, I feel like that is something I need to try. And that would be good for me to try with Carson too, because
Yeah.
I mean she's gotten into yoga with me and like meditation and like checking with our bodies and but being able to do stuff like that. And that's one thing I always try to remind parents, of kids of all ages is no matter how old our kids get, like they just like we still learn from what our parents do. Like they can say all they want, but we learn from action. So
Yeah.
showing up and like letting your kids know that you're not perfect and that there are bad days and you do have bad emotions, but you can get through them or you do make mistakes. And like if I raise my voice, as soon as I'm able to get myself back together, I'm like, I apologize. Like I yelled at you guys. I should not have done that. Even though I was stressed and I was angry and this happened, it still does not mean it's okay for me to yell at you guys over it. Like next time, what is something that I can do that would help me? So making it kind of a conversation for all of us. So it's a learning experience for all of us, but letting our kids see that and experience it with us, because that's how they're going to learn, is by watching what we do. So making them a part of the process is so, so key.
Well, and that's what I've been telling my clients who are kind of new to the self-care journey.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you don't do it for you, do it for your kids. Because self-care is more than just taking care of yourself. It's coping mechanism. It's de-stressing skills. And as you're learning, or as we, I can't say you, as we are learning these and incorporating them into our world, the kids are watching us and they're like, oh, maybe that's how I need to do that. Maybe that's what I should do instead. And it becomes just like how we brush our teeth or how we take care of our hair or how we wash clothes. There's certain ways that certain families like to wash their clothes so they last longer.
Yeah.
So as we're teaching our kids, teaching them these coping mechanisms, because stress is going to be there when we're older. It's when they're older, it just is.
Never
This
going
life
away.
isn't going to get easier.
Yeah.
So teaching them and then them watching you exactly is setting them up for success,
Oh,
truly.
well, and that's such a great point, because like I'm so big on like this has to be for you. It has to be for number one, which it does, but we know better than anyone else, just as moms and women. No matter how much we want to make ourselves a priority, we are the last priority, because everything else, those balls up in the air come first. No matter how much we like know we need to get that self-care in, or so making it that, okay, if you can't make yourself a priority and your kids are your priority, then do this for them.
Right. It's like, yeah, it's like changing that mindset. Like, okay, maybe I'm not going to have a long hot bath by myself tonight in the quiet, watching, binge watching something while I'm in the bath. But what can we do together as a family that's going to teach them and give them some insight on how they can cope and have good self-regulation skills as they're going and getting older? And we can do it
Yes.
together. Yeah.
Well, and I know you've kind of sort of touched on it. Normally, I don't ask people this, especially point blank, but based on why this podcast even exists. So are you currently a non-drinker?
Yeah. I completely quit 5 years ago.
Okay.
So I haven't been drinking for 5 years now. Um, and so, like I said, my process it's been evolving over, 25 years. And I went through phases where, um, I would just stop drinking for 6, 7 months and then I would drink again. And then I would stop drinking again. I haven't been a heavy drinker since my early 20s.
Mhm.
But, birthday parties roll around, Christmas rolls around, New Year's, there's a wedding, and it's like, oh, I drank too much and I don't feel good. For me, and again, how my body has evolved over time and how it functions under stress, I've learned that um, I really had to tap into my adrenal health. So our adrenal health is our adrenal hormones, sorry, our adrenal glands produce our stress hormones.
Okay.
And if anybody wants to know more, there's a lot of great information about that. Ironically, your adrenal glands are tied to all your other hormones. Um, so when we're overstressed for long periods of time, it affects the way our adrenal glands process our stress hormones. And sometimes then that will affect our thyroid, that will affect our insulin levels, that can affect our sex hormones. It kind of affects all of the hormones. And stress is kind of the number one cause. I won't go too deep into it now. But for me, and with my fibromyalgia diagnosis, I've learned over time that my adrenal glands just don't function at top capacity. So I can keep them healthy, but there's a lot of things that can get in the way of that very easily. And over time, I learned that alcohol was one of them. So it took about trial and error for many years of being like, oh, I'll be fine, I'll be fine. It won't be an issue. But then it just got to the point where I think the final straw was my husband and I went to Norway. I met him over in Norway and we spent a week there. And I didn't drink a lot. I had a glass of wine every night with dinner. But because of how my adrenal glands just don't function at top capacity, um, and the other stress that was kind of going on at that time, I felt terrible when I came home. And that was kind of the battle I fought for years was I would drink, feel terrible, not drink, and then drink, feel terrible, not drink, drink, feel terrible. And then I finally just said, you know what? I'm tired of fighting the battle. I'm just tired. This isn't
Yeah.
worth it anymore. So I looked up, it was Thanksgiving Day, 2018, 2019.
Okay.
And I'm gluten free. So Sky had found me some gluten free beer and brought it home for Thanksgiving. And I felt really bad because I'm like, oh, that was so nice, but I'm not going to drink any of it. And I said, you know what? I think I'm just done. I've been back and forth on this for the last 10 to 15 years. And I think I'm just tired of feeling like crap. I just need to make a decision. And I did. And once I made the decision, I just was done.
So
There's really
what,
no.
yeah, it sounds like, granted, it took time to get there.
Mhm. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I know that you, as you mentioned, you weren't like a heavy drinker at that point. What are some things that you've noticed since removing alcohol from your life, over the past couple of years?
I'm a very creative person. I'm a writer. I love to tap into my creative energy. Um, it has allowed me to
Mhm.
in
Okay.
more ways. And I think one of the reasons, and of course it's just biochemically how our bodies function, but one of my problems was I would get extreme brain fog,
Mhm.
hence the adrenal glands. But then when I would drink, it enhanced the brain fog. And so for me not to be able to really think as clearly or be as creative as I wanted to be, um, it hindered me from
Mhm.
really tapping into those creative juices that I love to have flow. So that's been a shift for me. Honestly, mostly energy one.
Okay.
I sleep better. I don't have as much anxiety, and my clarity. Those are the biggest things I notice.
Yes. And I'm so glad you brought up the creativity part because I know even myself, like I would have so much good flow after a certain level of drinking and, all these different things. And but the problem was I either didn't act on them or I didn't fully remember them or, all these different things. But I've definitely worked with a lot of people who are like, but that's where like the creativity comes from, the, whatever. And so it's so good to know with you, like you have firsthand experience that that's not the case. Like maybe at first you don't necessarily notice this huge shift, but eventually that comes back and it's so much stronger.
I think it was just getting in the way,
Yeah.
for me. And then I just realized that there's, excuse me, conversations have shifted for
Mm.
me when I'm with people, as well. I didn't realize that that was such a big thing because I thought, oh, we're drinking together, we're having these deep conversations, we're really bonding. But like you said, then the next day, I wouldn't remember half of them.
Yeah.
And then I realized that the bond that I thought was there wasn't really there. And that was hard for me because then I'd see these people I had these great, wonderful bonding conversations with outside of a social environment. Maybe I'd see them at work, or maybe I'd see them at the kids' school event or function, and there was no camaraderie. It was just
Hmm.
not there. And I'm like, oh, but we really bond. And I'm a deep person. I like to
Yeah.
bond with people.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, it's not there. And so I noticed that that has shifted, even though like the other people, like I could care less. And I don't want to say I could care less, but everybody, I'm a believer, do what you
Yeah.
want to do. I have a ton of friends who socially drink, and I travel with them. We spend our time with them. We have a great time, but it's changed the way that I interact in conversations. I feel
Mhm.
like I show up a little bit more. authentic and present than I did when I thought I was bonding with people. I
Totally.
don't, yeah.
Well, and I mean, I feel the same way because I mean, I still drink occasionally. Granted, it's a fraction of what it ever was in my entire life. Like, I literally joke that if you could, if 5 years ago you told anyone that knew me that this is what I was going to be doing, like we would all, including myself, we would put every penny on absolutely not. Like that's never going to happen. Erica not being, a big drinker, like what? So that's just hilarious. But I mean, I think that I've had so many like deep conversations with people. I mean, I would be the kind that was always, I could talk to anyone, but especially when we were drinking and like get so much out of people. But I have that in me naturally, and I don't need alcohol for that. And I think that you nailed it on the head. Like, yeah, some relationships do change, but if the only way that you can connect with someone is because you're both drinking, is that the connection that you want? I think is
Yeah.
kind of what it comes down to. And I had heard kind of early on, it was something that was kind of off-putting, I will say, but it was something along the lines like, if you need alcohol to hang out with your friends, are they the kind of friends that you want? And like, yeah, that can be very off-putting, but if that is the only thing you have in common is you guys really only enjoy each other's presence when you're drinking, like that's probably not the best thing for anyone in this relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm trying to, I mean, I know you and I've had a lot of conversations over the last several years about it too. And granted, the COVID thing happened after I stopped drinking. So that didn't affect me, but I know how much it affected so many people.
Oh yeah, my
Um,
drinking increased a ton during COVID. That's
yeah,
what
and I
led to
think
this
that's
whole
part of
thing.
your, yeah, that's
Yeah.
part of the story I think that you share with people is that's
Yeah.
kind of when you noticed.
Hmm.
Um, and I remember one time, and it is, and I think you and I were talking about it, and we would see these memes all the time on Facebook and all of that about people being able to cope with their kids by drinking and this and that and the other. And as moms, we can laugh about that. We can. It's funny.
Oh,
We
totally.
relate. It's true. It's like, oh my God. I get it. But, and you and I talked about this, what message is that sending to your children? Like if your kids overhear you saying that, it's kind of like that shame. Moms as daughters, we try to be really careful not to body shame ourselves because we don't want our daughters to overhear that and get that
Exactly.
message. It's the same thing with alcohol. If our kids are hearing that, oh, the only way I can cope being a parent is by drinking, the message that that sends them then as they're getting older and they're in relationships and trying to have healthy relationships, but is the only way they're able to do it by drinking. I mean,
Yeah.
that's not, yeah. So it's just conversations you and I've had. I don't think it's, I'm not saying right or wrong or indifferent, but it's things that we're noticing that are coming up that like maybe we need to have some more awareness around this.
Well, and that, I mean, I I would be the first to like buy those towels or, like
Yeah,
reshare whatever those posts or whatever. But because of like where I am now and exactly for the reasons you said, like with where my headspace is, it's not as funny to me as it used to be. Before,
right.
absolutely. Now I'm just like, eh. And granted, my mom's still like so many places that I look in her house, she has the pillows, the towels that, like it's wine o'clock somewhere and that shit.
Yeah,
And I still chuckle, but I try not to perpetuate that. Again, just more for not only myself, the subliminal messages, but obviously my kids and like what I'm teaching them or showing them. So,
but I think, as we as moms can so relate
oh God,
as
yeah.
wives, it can absolutely relate. We're like, yeah, we get that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
And I still
understand
I
that.
still laugh, don't get me wrong.
Yeah. But yeah, it's the time and place and what message
Yeah.
we're sending to our children around that.
Well, and I think the biggest thing, especially where just because of what I'm doing and who I'm working with, like all of those things they're funny. Like you said, there's time and place. But then when, like it's the mom dropping their kids off and like, pretending that they're drinking like on TikTok or whatever. And you see that, it's funny, you laugh at it, whatever. But then when anyone starts to be drinking more or it seems to be problematic, then all of a sudden like the judgment, the shame, all of that. And it's just like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. Like, this can't be funny on one note, but when someone actually does that, it's like, so that's, I
Yeah.
think, where the conflict arises, like internally, but also just culturally. Like, alcohol's everywhere, yet you're never supposed to have a problem with it. You should easily be able to, drink how much you want, whenever you want, but it should never be a problem. And it's like that. Literally, alcohol is designed for that not to be the case. That as soon as you have it, you want more of it. That's the whole purpose of what alcohol does in our bodies. So to then have the shame and the guilt around it if you can't stop after just one, or having days where you don't have a drink is challenging. Like, that's, I think, where it's become a lot more like problematic in my mind, because it just fuels the shame and the judgment
Mhm.
for people who alcohol is not an issue for them. And there's plenty of people that alcohol isn't, they are fine, take it or leave it
Yeah.
drinkers, but that's definitely not the majority.
Well, yeah, it is absolutely a mixed message. And I think the societal expectations, and I did run into that when I quit drinking, and it was a challenge.
Yeah.
Actually, I ran into it before I stopped drinking.
Yeah.
Um, there was a lot of peer pressure when I would go to social gatherings, and I lived up in the mountains of Colorado, in Denver. So I would go into the city, and I didn't want to drink because I knew I had an hour drive home, and I wasn't a big drinker, and I was still drinking at the time, but I wasn't a big drinker. But it's like, I'm going to go to this party in the city, but I'm not going to drink and then drive for an hour because I'll probably
Yeah.
fall asleep, and that's
Oh,
not good for
totally.
anybody. So, but the societal expectations and the peer pressure, and it made me laugh because I'm like, I'm in my 40s and I didn't give in to peer pressure in high school. Why am I feeling like this now?
Yeah.
It was like, it was shocking to me a little bit. Like, I can't believe I'm going and socially, and I have to explain to people why I'm not drinking. And then it
Which you
would
should
be
never
the,
have to explain to them, but yes, you feel the need
yeah.
to. Absolutely.
And it was, and then it was like, oh, just have one, just have one. No, I'm fine. And so there was kind of, I had to get okay with myself. It wasn't me getting okay with other people or other people being okay with me. It was me being okay with myself around being able to say, no, I don't want one.
Yes.
And it's funny because the shame is twofold. There's shame around drinking, and then there's shame when you don't drink and you're at a social event,
Mm-hmm.
because everybody wants to make sure you have a good time.
And fun,
And
having a good time means you have to be drinking. Like, that's how
yeah,
we're conditioned. Yeah. Well, and
and
I've seen so much that there's that judgment is kind of twofold, because people either are afraid that if you're not drinking, you are judging them for drinking, or it makes them start questioning themselves, and they don't want that. That's why they want you to have a drink in your hand too, and it's like, just like you said, you have to be okay with yourself, because I've definitely learned, and this is with everything, but when you have that confidence, no one really questions it. Like, if it's like,
right,
oh no, I'm good, it's
yeah.
you're like, no, it's, once you, the difference between having the confidence and being kind of like waffly on it, night and day on how people receive. And I feel like if they do try to peer pressure you in, but it always comes down to how they're feeling about themselves or their relationship with alcohol, or not even wanting that to be a thought in their mind. So it's just more comfortable not having you there.
I had that too. I would not get invited to parties,
Yeah.
which yeah, because well, she's not going to drink anyway. So does she really want to come? I'm like, yeah, I want to come. I'm social. I want to be around people. I can have a
Uh-huh.
great time. Yeah, so I had that too. So there definitely were things, but so I have to share this story because when I was a kid, I grew up in Nebraska and Deadwood, South Dakota. If you know where Deadwood, South Dakota is.
I've
When
heard
I
of
was
it. Yes.
Yes, when I was a kid, it wasn't the gambling city. It was just kind of this dead Western town.
Okay.
But I have a bunch of family in Deadwood. And so in the 70s and 80s, when I was a kid, we would go to Deadwood and they had these old saloons. So I became like at 3, 4, 5 years old, I became fascinated with bars. And I think bars are beautiful to this day. So I would go home and I would go into our basement. My brothers had their older brothers had their stereo system. I had my strobe light. I would get my mom's beautiful, fun cocktail glasses and food coloring. And I had my tip jar and I would turn the music on and I would create my own bar.
Oh my God, this is amazing.
I was a little kid. So when I became 20, I started bartending. And I love, love, love bartending. Love bartending. And there was an art to like mixing drinks. I just loved it.
Mhm.
So I stopped bartending when I was 20, 25, 26. Fast forward this last year, I'm living in Big Fork, Montana. We're building our house, and I needed to get away from the build and out of the camper we were living in while we were building. So I needed just a fun little job. So I got a job at a lodge and started bartending. And I had a blast. I forgot how much I love bartending. But the hard part about it is it's been 25 years.
Mhm.
There's like all these new beers and all this, and I don't drink. So there's all this new stuff out. I know nothing
Totally.
about it. I know nothing about it. Like when I was a bartender, there wasn't microbrews.
No, there was
No,
not espresso martinis.
no.
It was a vodka or gin martini, I'm sure.
There wasn't even Tito's vodka, and Tito's
Yeah.
is a big one. I've learned. So there's all these new tequilas and all these
Mhm.
new, vodkas and all of this stuff and distilleries all over the place. So, anyways, I bartended for a year and a half and I had a blast. But I was very, because I got to a place where I was confident in my not drinking, that I had regulars that would come in and I was fine sharing because they'd be like, "Oh, you're making a drink, just try it." And I'd be like, no, I don't drink. And I think the reason I thrived in the job and with the customers and the clients was because I was finally at a comfortable place with saying, "Hey, I can do this and I don't care what you do. I'll serve you drinks, I'll make you drinks, but this is my personal choice." And
Yeah.
that's all it is it's a personal choice for my
Mhm.
own health. Um, and so anyways, I had to share my bartending. And actually I haven't been doing it now for 3 weeks and I miss it. It's
Well, maybe you can do your
crazy.
own pop-up one.
Yeah, yeah, I do. There's an art about making drinks. Or either that or mocktails or
Oh,
something.
totally. There's
So,
some
yeah,
really great mocktails, not only
yeah,
that you can make, but some great accounts too that make some really, really beautiful ones. So,
yeah.
um, well, Hope, I could talk to you all day, but I want to respect your time, and I know that you're heading out on a girls' weekend tomorrow, so excited for you.
Yeah.
How can people contact you, learn more about you?
Yeah. So, my website, Hope for Health Wellness. I am in the process right now of creating a self-care toolbox. And that is kind of one of those things that, as we wrap up, I kind of want to preface, as well with kind of the drinking thing. I had a really good thought and insight with that. Um, that was going to lead into kind of those self-care type modalities that with coping and all of that. But now I've lost my thought. Now I remember what it is. Um, so anyways, is self-care toolkit on my website. I am just starting to piece it together. So you can go to Hope for Health Wellness and check out ways to work with me, check out the self-care toolkit. I am not, because we've just moved again.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not holding any in-person events right now, but I am open to scheduling um, women's wellness retreats and workshops and any online type gatherings that people want to have as well. I know virtual is not ideal for a lot of
Yeah.
people, but I obviously, you know, there's a community out there of people that just want to have discussions and support around some of these shifts that they can make with their health. And so I am not opposed to kind of getting creative and figuring out how we can do, whether it's women's circles. I travel a lot. My husband and I travel a lot, and being able to if somebody wanted to host, a women's wellness event, I'd, love to come out and kind of collaborate on that. So I'm open to ideas right now as I kind of evolve with the different places that I live.
Yes.
So
Well, and I cannot wait till you are back doing events, if that is something that comes to
yeah.
fruition again for you, because I've been to several. And I mean, when you were talking earlier about meditation and yoga, I remember, I think it was when I was pregnant with Carson, that I did one of your retreats, and I'm like, a little nervous about it because it was very yoga and meditation focused, and just like I like being pretty pregnant, can't move my body, like yoga's never really done anything for me at that point, and especially the meditation thing, like I cannot get quiet just in general, but especially silencing my thoughts in my brain, like and it was the first time, and I'm like, oh, I understand why people like yoga and why people meditate. Like it was just, oh, incredible. So I cannot wait for you to be doing that again. Hopefully that is something that comes back for you, but I know you're in a different chapter right now, and so we'll see. But maybe
Yeah,
you and me will be able to do an event together.
that would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So
I think life is settling down a little bit from the past few years where I kind of had to put it on hold and definitely open to whatever opportunities with it arise. And I'm going with the flow and seeing what doors open. And yeah,
mm,
yeah.
awesome. Well, I'm so grateful for you. You are a wealth of knowledge and a total breath of fresh air. So grateful
Oh,
for you being here and
thank
for your
you.
friendship, and just so glad we were able to do this. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm glad we got to do it too. I love talking to you all the time.
You too.
So
I
every time that
know,
we do.
literally all day we could do this, but
Mhm.
for our time and anyone watching or listening. But I'll make sure to include all your information
Okay.
in the show notes so people can find it directly there. But besides that, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening, for showing up. And that's all I got for today. So, mwah! See you soon.